Hey there, welcome back to the Meat Thinker channel. I couldn't start today's cook fast enough because this was my first brisket ever on my Brazos offset. I was imagining biting into that melt in your mouth soft brisket with the robust wood smoke flavor and reaching for that second piece because the first bite you just had was so good. Well, today's cook ended up only being that imagination because I had many failures during this cook and I'm going to share what those were. So let's get to it. Mistake number one, not buying the best brisket. I'm a working dad and of course with everything going in life, I was late going into the store on Friday. When I went to Costco, there were only 3 packages left on display and I picked the better out of 3. If you don't see the one you like, make sure you walk away and go to another store to find you one that you like. Mistake number 2, not having proper sized firewood. This is all because I'm new to this smoker and didn't realize how big or small the firewood should be. This time I had the firewood split a little too long for the firebox and a little too big to keep the temperature swing small for the consistent cooking. Mistake number 3, not having the right tools to cut the firewood to proper size. This is a matter of where and how big of firewood you get from your supplier. My batch ended up being too long for my manual log splitter and I didn't have the right tools to cut them to size. Make sure to have proper tools to cut and split your firewood that fits your firebox. Mistake number 4, making changes to your setup before the actual cook. My biggest mistake on this list was that I added a water pan in front of the firebox and the water pan obstructed the path of the heat and smoke and caused a temperature difference of 100 degrees from the middle of the grate to the stack end of the grate. This is the biggest lesson I learned from this cook. Mistake number 5, not wearing appropriate shoes. Some of you would probably say wearing Crocs itself is a sin. And yes, I was wearing Crocs when I was dumping the charcoal into the firebox. When I dumped the charcoal, hot burning ashes fell through the holes and burned my toes. So fashion judgment aside, for your protection, always wear closed-toe shoes when handling fire. Mistake number 6, falling asleep. I fell asleep once during this cook and the cook chamber temperature went down to about 150 degrees before I could get the fire back up running. Falling asleep not only delays the cook, but also could affect the final outcome of your meat. Mistake number 7, telling your wife this is going to be the best brisket ever. This goes without saying, but the game ain't over until it's over. There are too many variables in the cook, so don't be overconfident until you slice that thing open and taste the brisket. With all the mistakes I made in mind, let's go back to the cook. So you can witness my mistake number 2 here. I threw in 3 giant splits into the firebox to get the fire going and try to bring the temperature down to 200 degrees. It got a little too hot going past 300 degrees on the stack side, so I had to wait quite a bit for the temperature to come down. I put the brisket in when the temperature came down to 220. The firebox side probe was reading at 310, but it went in anyways, all because I made a mistake of number 4, adding a water pan before making sure it won't affect the cook. 4 hours in, the bark has set and the fat outside is turning yellow. It's looking pretty decent despite the temperature difference on the grate level. 7 hours in, the bark is nice shiny dark brown. The fat is dripping down from the grate. One thing to note here is 2 large pulling spots on the flat. I tried to drain it, but the fat kept pulling around these 2 spots. Here is a snapshot of the temperature during the cook. I was going off of the stack side temperature because the firebox side temperature was swinging anywhere between 50 to 100 degrees higher than the stack side. 10 hours in, the internal temperature went up to 180 degrees. It's time for a full boat. Put the brisket back in the smoker until it reaches 200 degrees. I couldn't figure out why the pulling was happening in these 2 spots. I stuck my finger underneath to examine it, but it felt like a solid meat underneath, so I decided to keep going. I put the brisket in the oven at 170 degrees for resting. The brisket rested around 7 hours in the oven. It's time to slice it up. The brisket has some jiggle to it, but not perfect jiggle you see from other videos. Pour the juice over the brisket so it doesn't go to waste. Feeling it around, and the fat seemed a little too bouncy. My fingers didn't quite sink in. I cut this open in half and see a nice smoke ring. The fat renders somewhat decent, but I could see the point side turn a little flaky. I think this was from that 50 to 100 degree temperature difference. Let's slice the flat side. Luckily, I didn't see any crazy abscess or cyst under the pulling spots. It may have been the fat was cut too thin and not leaving too much to render. That will be the only guess I could make. The meat was definitely tender but didn't pass the finger test. It did pull off easy with a little bit of resistance. Cutting out that pulling spot and chop this into a bite size for a taste. It definitely had a good flavor, a bit chewy. It didn't dissolve in the mouth like you would expect on a top-notch brisket. The bottom side of the flat also turned flaky as well. It took more effort to cut through. Slicing into the point, underneath the bark was a little flaky while the bark itself was too crispy. But underneath the bark, at least the point meat survived the high heat and tasted great. Smoky flavor with plenty of juice left to taste. Overall, it didn't turn out as bad considering the temperature difference on the grate level. I was trying to figure out what went wrong because I had this dialed in when I smoked the spare ribs. Then I remembered I've added a water pan, and that was the culprit for the huge temperature difference. When I removed the water pan, the temperature came within 25 degrees. When I removed the stack extension, that's when I was able to get the temperatures across the grate within 10 degrees. That's when I learned how sensitive this big chunk of steel can be, and I needed to do a better job keeping things consistent and not make any big changes. I've had awesome results on my briskets from a pellet smoker before, and I was overconfident that I would be able to do the same with my Brazos. The more time I spend with it, the more I realize I will have to pay my dues to make great briskets. I believe learning from these mistakes is a part of paying that due to operate this smoker. Even with these mistakes, I've had such a great time staying up late, drinking a few beers, playing with the fire, learning how to use the smoker, and looking forward to eating that great barbecue I cooked. This is such a peaceful joy I didn't get to experience before. Now I'm hooked on this new habit and looking to do more of it. What kind of mistakes did y'all make when you started out on this offset smoker? I'd love to hear about them, so please share your experiences in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, check out my Instagram handle @MeatThinker. Thank you for watching and keep meat thinking.